you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host, Ken Bialo. We've been doing this for 15 to 20 years. I lose count.
Yes.
Ken,
Good evening, Marian.
how are you?
Good evening.
Of course, you served as mayor of the village of Larchmont for 4 years, and as trustee, unpaid trustee and unpaid mayor, trustee for 11 years on the Larchmont Village Board.
Yes, that's it. And you served for 4 years on the Larchmont Village Board, and then thereafter as the chair of the Republican Party for, what, 10 or 12?
Or 30 years, sometime it seemed like
something
it
like
was
that.
When we had very hotly contested elections.
Yes, hotly contested elections without any compensation for the trustee or mayor. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it really is. And we always had more than 43 votes.
We are referring, of course, to a headline in one of the local newspapers saying, board considers compensation for mayor and trustees. And of course, Marian and I both served as volunteers. And it's hard to imagine that this group, although it's hard to imagine most of what they do, but it's particularly hard to imagine that in this particular instance, they're talking about serving as volunteers, but volunteers who get compensation. Isn't that a contradiction in terms?
Yes, I don't quite understand that.
An oxymoron, maybe?
And of course, the timing seems so strange with people losing their jobs left and right, because this will add expense to the village budget.
Yeah, so in this context, in this horrific sort of economic context, they're talking about taking more money from the village treasury, which of course means, where do they get it from? More money from the taxpayers for themselves. How interesting. It's really quite amazing.
Well, I actually don't think it's a very bright thing to do, because if you take the number of hours, if you divide the amount they would be paid by the number of hours, at least that we worked, we would have been making 10 cents an hour.
Or
well,
less.
I would have been making, 50 cents an hour. You would have been making 10 cents an hour, because you worked thousands and thousands of unpaid hours.
Well, but here's an interesting thing. One of the trustees, Trustee Colbert, according to the report in the Larchmont Gazette, said she asked the board to consider compensation, and she indicated that perhaps the turnout at the last village election, which was only a few weeks ago, which turned out to, by the way, the grand total was 43 voters. 43 voters in the village of Larchmont. Doesn't say much for this particular group. But I have to say, her comment was, maybe so few people run for office, and there are not contested elections, because board members are not compensated. And the point that you were making just a moment ago is, we had very hotly contested elections in the 90s and the early 2000s, and nobody ever dreamt of being compensated. And we had more than 43 votes at every election. I can absolutely guarantee that.
Well, also, I don't know if you would agree, but I certainly think in the 90s that everyone was just more civil. We respected our opponents. We knew we were just people around the block, and we wanted to do our civic duty, and we would do it, and then, we would move on, and someone else would come and do it. But, not making it this huge contest, but being just very civil and saying what our point of view was, and then the voters could choose whichever point of view they wanted to have representing them.
There's, if what you're referring to is the sort of nastiness undercurrent
Yes,
in current civic affairs in Larchmont, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's been there for a couple 3 years perhaps. And I think it's a darn shame that things have deteriorated to that point. In fact, on that very point, wasn't there some comment made by the mayor, the current mayor in Larchmont, about how people shouldn't be allowed to say things on these blogs where they don't put their names on them? Local bloggers have become particularly nasty of late without signing their names to their harsh attacks, said the mayor. Your elected officials are doing the best they can with fewer resources and options, which I would suggest is actually of their own making. But nevertheless, if you want to help the community in these tough times, I can see the sincerity dripping. Don't hide behind anonymous potshots. Have the guts to put your name on what you write. I suspect that a lot of people don't put their names on what they write because they fear retribution and nastiness emanating from Village Hall in Larchmont, and that's a reason for the existence of these blogs. If everything was going well and people were really doing a decent job instead of a bunch of phony baloney, I don't think you'd have people complaining and saying nasty things
Well,
about
people always
elected
have
officials in
differing
Larchmont.
opinions, but
Yes, but if you have a nasty tone about you, then it provokes people to have a nasty tone in what they say.
that's certainly true. And if the board seemed more interested in listening to different points of view, that's something we've talked about a lot with the artificial turf and also the fire
Oh, my
department.
goodness.
That it seemed like minds were already made up, that there wasn't really an open hearing where people were really listening to different opinions.
Well, and if you remember correctly, people were treated very badly. At one point, the mayor
Yes.
and Trustee Milstein, when Ned Benton was talking, got up and left the room. And that during the discussions of the fire department, the board members were shouting down members of the public, which is just outrageous. And the same thing happened with the environmental expert that was brought in by the people who opposed the turf field. I believe the fellow's name was Dr. Brown, and when he got up to speak, he was shouted down and told he couldn't speak. You know, if you want respect, I suggest Village Board in Larchmont, you ought to give it, and not sit around saying you're going to edit what people say because you don't like that they're being nasty. If you're nasty, you're going to get it back.
Well, and I also remember as a trustee, I was really listening to what I hadn't made up my mind before the public commented. So I really was listening to all sides. Everyone seemed much more open then, and that that wasn't decided in advance.
Well, I think there's something to that as well, and this is, it seems to me, a fair comment about this particular group. This group strikes me as sort of the Washington cabal, the way things work in Washington, which is nobody's really listening to what anybody else is saying. Everybody's pushing their own agenda and trying to manipulate the press, which in a small village like this is of necessity, not very vigorous, trying to manipulate the press to get the press to say the things that will make them look good. So, presumably, they can get reelected. That's the way things work in Washington. You maneuver around the back rooms, and then you try and figure out how you want to make it come out, and then you make it come out.
Well, and the mayor...
It has no place here in the village of Larchmont, I
But the
think was your
mayor
point.
actually does come from a Washington setting. I mean, that's where she became active. So, I guess maybe she just has a different point of view from simple little me, thinking that we're all neighbors and we're all just trying to do our best and listening.
Yeah, that sounds almost naive, doesn't it, compared to the back office machinations of Washington, power brokers
Gee,
and
a
lobbyists.
teeny little 1 square mile village,
I think we really need the Washington style.
Not at all.
I like your style better.
But, so I know that one of the big things is the budget, and the headlines say that the tentative budget, the increase is about 2.4%.
Yes, the lowest budget in 7 years.
Which sounds good, except I don't know that it makes sense
Well,
when you read further.
and you are referring to, I take it, the comments that were made by Trustee Milstein about the pension costs, in part.
Yes.
Well, I don't understand two things. One
Okay.
is I don't understand why there's a 2.4% increase as opposed to a 0% increase. And I particularly don't understand that in light of the fact that these people are announcing that they're going to be cutting 4 positions from the village staff. 2 cops, 1 water department employee, and 1 fireman. If you're cutting 4 employees, I want to know how come you're having a 2.4% increase in taxes as opposed to either a 2.4% decrease in taxes or a 0 increase in taxes, which is, it seems to me, exactly where you should be in this year. This is a bad year for tax increases.
And
People have
other
lost their
communities have had
Yes, they
0
have.
increases.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. I know there's one in here that I saw just the other day. Yeah, and so that's one question.
Right.
How can you have an increase when you're firing 4 people? The second question that occurs to me, and you brought it to my attention, is this mumbo jumbo about what they're doing about pension costs. Everybody knows that our employees, or should know, that our employees in the village of Larchmont are part of the state pension system.
Which is a wonderful system. I so wish I were part of it.
Exactly right. And everybody knows that that's a defined benefit system, and
Right.
it has been for years, and it was corrupted back in the late 90s when the then controller, Carl McCall, not only reduced the contribution that the individuals had to make, but in fact turned around and cut checks to the individual members of the pension system, gave them money back because the stock market was doing so well. And then, shortly after I was elected mayor, the stock market tanked. The pension fund, when it was run by Controller Hevesy and his now 2 indicted henchmen, right, jacked up the pension costs on us astronomically. And we did every year, we budgeted for that. We knew what the number was going to be.
You mean that the pension,
They sent us a bill.
the controller told you what
Yep.
was going to be owed?
He sent us a bill in April and said, this is what we think it's going to be. And then they'd refine that some more in August, and then they'd give you the actual bill. Here, you owe us this much money in December.
But you would put something in the budget at this time because you knew something would be coming.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why our tax increases. For my first year as mayor, our tax increase was 1.9%, which was very much in keeping with the late 90s and
Right.
the early 00s. The next 3 years, when the controller was just killing us with these pension fund increases, our tax increases were 6.5%, 8.5%, and 7.7%. That's, I can't remember what the total of that is, about 24%, of which 5% was attributable to what actually happened in the village.
Over the whole time
Over that
period,
whole
it was
time period.
5%?
And 18+%, if I remember the numbers correctly, was attributable to what the controller did in terms of the pension cost increase. In our first year when I was mayor, I think our contribution was $20,000, and my last year was like $1 million. So they just killed us. And in fact, the state legislature passed special legislation that said, okay, we know we're killing you with the pension cost. You can borrow money from us to make your pension contributions, which is the last thing on earth you want to do, is to borrow money
Yeah.
to pay current operating expenses.
Right.
Once you do that, you're pickled, just like New York
Right,
City was
right.
pickled in the mid-'70s. So we never did that. And the tax increases over the last few years on this particular group that serves on the village board has never gotten back to the levels that we had it at in the late
You had
90s and the early 00s.
Under 2%.
Under 2%. They haven't had any increases of this sort in the pension fund
Right.
contributions, but their tax increase has been 4.5%, 3.9%, 5.0%. In my mind, that's spending like drunken sailors instead of getting it back to 1.9%. But now, this was your point, and you brought it to my attention. I think you're absolutely right. Trustee Milstein says, explain the defined benefit plans are still the norm in government and must pay more to guarantee the promised benefits when the investments plummet. He said, pension costs are expected to rise by the end of the year. Well, does that mean that they're budgeting for those rises now? Or does that mean, as you pointed out, that they're not including the rises for the pension costs now, and they'll stick it in later somehow, without
Just
hearings,
take
without going
it.
through the budget? Yeah, it's sort of
Yeah.
fooling around with either the rainy day fund or some other vehicle for being able to pay those bills later on. It doesn't say in this report, and I don't know whether this is a good report or not a good report, but I can say this. If Trustee Milstein is trying to tell us that they haven't put into the current 2.4% increase
Well,
the
that's what
expected
it sounds
pension
like, right.
increases, then that's really a bunch of malarkey. It's even more malarkey than this group is usually capable of.
But because you said that by this time in the budget year, you always had some idea of what the
Yes.
increase would be.
Yes, they tell you.
So you always included it in that budget.
Absolutely. It's on the budget line. It goes into the budget. Budgeting, particularly in a small village like this where you have a lot of ups and downs, is an art rather than a science. So you make guesstimates in April of what you're going to spend during a fiscal year that starts a month later, June 1st,
Right.
and runs around to May 30th. So they're guesstimates. But the quality of the paper that you got from the controller's office was no worse than the stuff that you got from your own employees about
Right.
kind of guessing at what you're going to be
I
spending.
remember debating how much salt we should buy for
Exactly
this
right.
cleaning the streets. And you know, was it going to be a 10-year kind of
Right,
winter,
right.
or what were we going to do?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, that's the kind of stuff. But this is kind of, it just is, if that's what they're saying, I don't know if it is, but if they're saying we haven't included it now and somehow we're going to do
That's
it later.
certainly how I read it.
Yeah, well, That's the impression that you're left with when you read it. That's really pretty poor. That is pretty poor.
Well, it's just scary because you said that those kinds of increases when you were there were 7 and 8%, I think you said.
You bet.
So,
You bet they probably averaged. I'm going to guess that the controller's increases for the 3 years when we really got murdered by Mr. Hevesy, I'm going to guess, I'm looking right now, it's 15, 22, 23%. I'm guessing that the controller's increase were 18% of that 23%. So 5 or 6 of it, I'm going to say, was ours, and the rest was the controllers. So the market was tanking.
right.
And I don't know about who was advising the controller, state controller, but we know that his 2 colleagues have now been indicted. So you can only guess. You can only guess what kind of advice he was getting.
Well, so we don't really know there's more to run in the budgeting process, but the tradition is that this is the preliminary or the tentative, and
Yep.
then it
Yep.
keeps coming down. Though actually last year this board raised the budget at the last moment.
Yes, they did.
So I guess they don't necessarily follow tradition.
Yeah, well, we always cut it, and you can see even in these numbers that we cut it sometimes by half from what the staff wanted to what we
Right.
wound up with.
You're right, because in the beginning it's sort of what the staff wants.
Yeah,
And
and then you
work at it.
negotiate it down and you look for things to cut out because you got to keep it down under 2%.
Right,
That was the
right.
whole point. Keep it down under the cost of living increases. Last year, when these guys got a hold of the tentative, it was at 4.7, and by the time they got done with it, it was 5.0.
Wrong direction.
Wrong direction, board. Wake up.
I know another thing you wanted to talk about was the tree trimming that's going on.
Well, I don't know if it's going on. Did you have this in your neighborhood? Con Ed swept through and just chopped the
Oh,
heck out of all
yes,
kinds
yes,
of trees?
yes. We did in Pine Brook, absolutely. And even one person in Pine Brook, they weren't careful and they damaged his fence. And anyway, just you'd think they could be more careful.
Well, when I was the mayor, the way it worked was Con Ed would call it, and this Cheryl Louie, who was mayor before me, actually started this, and it was exactly right, and we continued it when I was the mayor. And that is, Con Ed would call and say, we're going to be there, or our guys are coming on Tuesday. And the village engineer or the DPW supervisor, or both, would go out with the Con Ed guys and look at the trees that they were planning on pruning and seeing how they were planning on doing it, what they were planning on doing. And if they were talking about taking down a tree, checking to make sure that the takedown of the tree met our standards, which is the thing is sick and dying, that's why you're taking it down.
Right.
Other than that, you don't take it down. Right?
Right.
I've always been big on trees. We planted 280 trees when I was there, or whatever, 240 trees when I was the mayor.
It all started with Cheryl, right? Didn't Cheryl get us to be a tree city?
She did, but
Yes.
she didn't get us 240 trees in 2 years. Anyway, so apparently Con Ed came through, and there's something in the newspapers about how Con Ed didn't notify the homeowners. Forget about the homeowners. Where were the village guys? Where's the mayor? Where was the supervisor of the DPW? And we have 2 supervisors of DPW now. Maybe they couldn't figure out which one was supposed to do this. In the old days, we only had one. It was pretty easy. They don't have a village engineer, although they complained that I'd gotten rid of the village engineer. They don't have a village engineer, so there was, I don't know who they would call in the village hall other than the mayor. Where was the mayor when these guys were going through planning to cut down trees? And I say this because there was a tree directly across from our house, which they just chopped down. Just chopped down. It's about this big around in the base, right? And
They
you go
just
and look at
chopped
it,
it
there was
down?
absolutely nothing wrong with the tree so far as I could tell. Not only in what was left as the stump, but all the pieces along that were scattered around. So tell me why it was that Con Ed cut that down. So tree
I
with a
didn't
base
know they
this
would
big?
cut a whole tree down.
Yeah, cut a whole tree down. Base
'cause
this big?
Oh, wow. Well, anyway, we have to have a break right this
Okay.
moment. We have a very special segment to follow, so we'll be back in a moment with our special guest. I am so excited, Ken. I wanted to have this special guest on our show since the beginning, and she is very elusive. But it is our very own Kate Bialo, who is the executive director of the Furniture Share House, which is the Westchester Furniture Bank.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming, Kate.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
You're very welcome.
And we should say that there's a special event Saturday, April 25th, and we'll get into that, but
Right.
we want to just keep reiterating Saturday, April 25th.
Countywide Furniture Drive.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about the Furniture Share House?
Well, Furniture Share House, Westchester's Furniture Bank, was founded in late 2006 with the assistance of the Junior League of Westchester on the Sound. We are a furniture bank, and what that means is that we collect gently used furniture from the public in a warehouse.
Specifically gently.
Gently, yes. Gently
Okay.
is an important part of it. We have a warehouse at the Westchester County Airport that we lease from the county. We collect the furniture there, and then we have a network of member agencies, social service agencies throughout Westchester County. We have about 30 member agencies, and they are the ones who refer their clients to us. These are agencies that work with homeless people moving out of shelters into empty apartments who basically have no furniture and come to our warehouse, and they're able to select 5 to 10 items of gently used furniture free of charge to help make their house a home.
And don't you also have, I remember you've said there's an interior designer that helps people?
We are staffed by volunteers. We have volunteers from the Junior League and from the community who come on Wednesday and Thursday morning, which is when we work with our clients. And they act as shopping assistants, and they walk around with the clients and help them. They have a pre-selected list of items that they're looking for, and so our volunteers walk around with them and help them select the items that they need. And the clients can either bring their own truck or they can use our low-cost delivery service. So,
Who are some of the member agencies? That's always interesting.
West Hab Inc. was our very first agency. They are the largest provider of homeless services in Westchester County. Westchester Jewish Community Services, Human Development Services of Westchester. We actually have about 6 or 8 agencies that are based here in the Sound Shore area. The Guidance Center, Hispanic Resource Center, Washingtonville Housing Alliance. As I said, we have about 30 agencies altogether.
Well, and wasn't your founding fortuitous, because weren't you just getting going and then we had that terrible flood?
We were, as I said, we were founded in late 2006. We were scheduled to open on April 24th, 2007, which was actually 9 days after the flooding. And so we were obviously in a good position to make a difference for everybody that lost their possessions in the flood. And in fact, within a month of the flood, we opened up a distribution center down here in Harbor Island.
That's
and
just
in the space
amazing.
of 2 weeks, we were able to help 65 families.
And the floods you're talking about are the floods that invaded in Mamaroneck Village, the Sheldrake and the Mamaroneck River when they overflowed during those horrendous
Well,
rains.
Mamaroneck was
and
obviously
everything.
one of the hardest hit. Yeah.
Well, that was incredible to pull it together. and
Timing
to
is
be able
everything,
to make a
right?
difference. Well, executive ability is also.
Right.
Why don't you tell us what this furniture drive is and how it works?
Well, obviously, you can't be a furniture bank without furniture, and one of our biggest challenges is keeping up with enough inventory to help our clients. I mean, in these economic times, you can imagine people are not throwing out furniture as readily as they used to. They're not redecorating as often as...
Can you give a sense of the size of the warehouse? The warehouse is what, 6,000 square feet?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, just so you know, it's not a tiny little place.
Yeah,
it's
it's
a huge
huge.
place. Yeah,
Right.
it's a huge place.
Yeah. So we've got room for furniture, and what we need is obviously furniture to keep up with what is now rapidly increasing demand. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who need. So one of the ways we're trying to address this is with our countywide furniture drive, and that, as you said, is going to be on Saturday, April 25th. And we're going to have 3 different drop-off locations. The closest one to us is going to be at Playland Park. We also are accepting donations at our warehouse at the Westchester County Airport. And we have a 3rd drop-off location at the town of North Castle Town Hall in Armont.
Okay.
And basically, we are asking people to bring their gently used furniture to us at our drop-off locations, because that allows us to collect a lot of furniture without spending the money to drive around the county and pick it up. What we do ask is that people go to our website first, though, and make sure that the furniture that they have to donate is furniture that we can take. As you mentioned,
What's the website?
the website is www.furnituresharehouse.org.
Okay.
And as I said, if you go there to our donation guidelines, you'll see the kinds of items that we can take and the kinds of things that we can't take. If everybody just keeps in mind that we're dealing with people who are moving into very small apartments, and so first of all, we need everything to be in good condition. We don't have the resources to repair or fix anything, so it needs to be able to go right back out the door again. We also need them to be moderately sized. Again, people have small apartments, and so they can't take that giant armoire that you have in your bedroom, or king-size bed, or the extra long sectional sofa that you have. So keep in mind, moderately sized, good condition. website lists everything that we can take. We do take smaller pieces like lamps and rugs.
TVs.
TVs, right? No larger than 27 inches, none of those really big, huge, deep ones.
Side tables, tables and chairs.
Yep, dressers. We do take used bedding, which everyone says, oh, well, how are you able to do that? Because we don't sell it, we are allowed to do that. We only take bedding that's in very, very good condition. And our clients need them. I mean, new beds are very expensive, and so
When you said,
they fly out the door.
and aren't they're really moving into a bare apartment, aren't they? I mean, it's not like
In most
they
cases,
really have
in most
anything.
cases, they are. You know, they're moving out of shelters or domestic violence shelters, and they don't have a lot. And increasingly, we have families who have suffered a loss of everything from bed bugs too. So there are lots of cases where people are really sort of starting from scratch.
And
Wow.
how many families has Furniture Share House helped in its roughly 2 years of existence?
We've been open just about 2 years, and we've helped 475 families, and that's being
Wow.
open 2 mornings a week by referral only. So that's over 1,300 people. Over 500 of them are children. So obviously the need is out there, and we are
On a shoestring budget of what?
about $70,000 a year. I mean, our average cost per family is about $250, which brings me to the other important piece of this, which is in addition to your furniture, we can also use money. I mean, we are on a shoestring like every other, pinch like every other nonprofit in Westchester County and the country for that matter. So we are always thrilled to have monetary donations as well, which can be made through our website, which again is FurnitureSharehouse.org. So just remember the Furniture Drive, Saturday, April 25th. 9 to 2, details about the different drop-off locations and the directions, and again, guidelines of what we can and can't take are on the website. So,
And again, the website.
FurnitureSharehouse.org.
And people can also volunteer their time, right?
Absolutely. As I said, we have volunteers who help as shopping assistants on Wednesday and Thursday mornings, and we can also use volunteers for the Furniture Drive itself. So if people are interested in helping out at the drive, again, go to the website and there's a way to volunteer.
Well, Kate, it's just amazing what you've put together from nothing.
Well,
Yep.
I
To
had a
have
lot of
a
help.
sustaining
It's just-
I had a lot of help.
organization.
The Junior League of Westchester
Junior
on the
League is-
Sound is
Junior
a
League has
supporting
done a great job.
organization.
Yep.
They support us as a community project. They provide us with volunteers and annual funding. We have a lot of volunteers from the community, so it's definitely
Quite a project.
a big effort.
But I think I'm hearing murmurings from behind the camera that
Right.
it's wrap-up time.
So April 25th, but please go to www.FurnitureSharehouse.org. Thank you for doing this for the community.
Thank you,
Kate.
guys.
Thank you for doing it for the community, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Finally.
Finally, right?
And thanks to LMC-TV, and we'll see you next time.